Okay, I'm sitting here with Brent Fikowski, and we're going to talk about Achilles today in CrossFit. But yeah, you kind of wanted to come on my show, so it's going to be kind of not a typical show, but kind of a back and forth. So why don't you tell people who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Brent Fikowski. I competed in CrossFit for 12 years. 9 of those I competed at the CrossFit Games, finishing as high as second, third, fourth, third in the world. Yeah, I think I got those right. Anyway, did pretty well in CrossFit. Before that, I played competitive indoor volleyball. And so I've always had kind of a bit of an interest in, knee and Achilles health and getting back into some recreational volleyball now. But to the purpose of this, interview, I wanted to talk to one of the experts here, Jake, and get some more info on how CrossFitters, specifically kind of through the PFA Athlete Association, wanting to give some free resources to them and talk about how can an athlete that is a CrossFit athlete prevent Achilles ruptures, Achilles injuries.
hmm Yeah, so you wanted me to introduce myself on my own show. So I'll say it. I was
Yeah.
I was a college strength coach for maybe like a decade. All kinds of sports, mostly basketball. Uh, and I kind of lost the love for that because you don't get paid much. But I had many hundreds, thousands of athletes under my belt training for sports, seen a bunch of injuries and whatnot. And then I got into tendon stuff, started looking up tendons because I had a history of patellar tendinopathy, jumper's knee, which the medical system failed me. Physical therapy didn't work for me. Surgery didn't work for me. Physical therapy again didn't work for me. And I fixed it through strength and conditioning principles, through loading, progressing the loading, being smart about the plyometrics, fixed my jumper's knee, and then it came back many times, switched knees because of being a basketball player, dunking basketballs, just abusing my patellar tendons. It has come back many times, but I always know how to manage it. So yeah, ever since 2020 during COVID was when I started doing my tendon research or looking into reading a lot about tendons. And since then on this podcast, I've probably had mostly all of the tendon experts on my show, and my interest in patellar has carried over to the Achilles because I've had so many hundreds of people come to me with Achilles tendinopathies, Achilles tendon rupture rehabs. And yeah, it just has, over the last 5 years, has created this knowledge base of what I think people are missing in their training and what could potentially be leading to them getting tendinopathy or getting tendon ruptures, and then even failed rehabs. Like, why are they not able to get back to where they were in the first place? So, yeah. Anyways, let's go on to the CrossFit. We had a phone call a few months ago, and you were telling me this in CrossFit, these Achilles ruptures. So, tell me what's the story with what's going on there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, recent memory here, just a week ago, one of my friends, Samuel Quant, tore his Achilles. It was in, sort of athletically jumping over this box and then turning that into a sprint. Typically in CrossFit, what you'll see is rebounding box jumps, whether they're box jump overs or just repetitive, jumping backwards off the box, landing with both feet and, really quickly jumping back onto the box. You've seen Achilles ruptures. Some really notable ones like 2012, one of the best athletes in the world, 2016, an Australian female athlete, Lethea Boone. So I'm kind of going through my head here, but tons of Achilles ruptures. And I think I've spoken to some of the best coaches in CrossFit about them. And I think there's a lack of, real understanding, like what's going on there, what can be done to prevent it. I think a lot of people just kind of avoid the rebounding box jump because they're afraid of it in training. And then it is programmed less and less in competitions than it used to be, but it still comes up, or variations of it still come up. Or even last weekend with Sam, it wasn't a rebounding box jump and he tore his Achilles. So it's a bit of this black hole or black box, I suppose. And I spoke with Sam that night after he tore his Achilles. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I was actually, I'm going to have this podcast. I had this set up with Jake, and but hopefully, the awareness of it with Sam can lead to reinvigorated interest amongst CrossFit athletes and the coaches as to how can I prevent this in the athletes I work with, or myself. And so yeah, really the biggest thing is repetitive rebounding box jumps is the big culprit that we see, at least the incident of the rupture, and done in these workouts, right, whether they're fast workouts that are 2-minute sprints, or maybe 20 minutes and you've got like 100 or 200 of these rebounding box jumps, combined with multiple other movements. So the body's going to be tired, whether it's from workouts prior in the day, prior in the week, or, just movements. You might be doing heavy deadlifts into rebounding box jumps, which, maybe that's part of the cause. Like, is that tightening up that posterior chain? Or what can you do in training really just to reduce the risk if you are going to competition with rebounding box jumps? Like, what can be done in the days and the weeks and the months leading up to reduce
Yeah.
that risk of a rupture?
Okay. Yeah, so I look at those movements you talked about, that rebound box jump, where it's like you're jumping up, you're jumping back down, and it's like your body mass is going backwards, and then you have to come back forwards. And just something inherent about that movement. It's the same thing when your friend hopped over the log. So it's like this vertical movement into this horizontal. Same thing with a false step in basketball, where that foot's going backwards to trying to go forwards. That heel is dropping to the ground, which is lengthening the Achilles. And then the calf is engaging to try to get you to move forward. And it's like this mistiming, bad communication between the two, where that tendon is already lengthened out because the heel's dropping, and then the calf engages. Maybe the calf engages a little bit too late, and that's pulling on the tendon, and then you get this pull on both ends. And then some people end up going on to rupture. So I think these are movements. So the false step, if you're a basketball player, you have to do the false step. There's no question about it. You have to do it. If you're doing the rebound box jumps in CrossFit, you have to be prepared for the rebound box jumps. If you're doing a vertical over a log into a sprint, you have to be prepared for that. So the first thing is just preparation. Like, if you're going to take someone off the couch for 1 year and be like, let's go do rebound box jumps, you're a 40-year-old out of shape, metabolically unhealthy person, I'm like, you're probably going to blow a lot of people's Achilles, because there's something about that movement that's stressful on the Achilles. Versus if you take a group of people who are prepared for that rebound box jump, or just prepared physically, they're going to see a lot less Achilles ruptures. So the first thing is just physical preparation. Are you physically prepared for what you want to do? And then we want to get into kind of what I think is why these are happening, what kind of maybe prehab strategies or what training do we need to do? Because before I ask that question, I think talking to a lot of Achilles researchers, there's one in Delaware, Karin Silbernagle. I asked her this question: why are there more Achilles ruptures in the NFL or NBA or in a bunch of other sports? And I think she was coming from, no one's really training calves in the first place. Like, who is dedicating time to training calves? But if you think of any strength and conditioning plan, we're going to do stuff for the upper body, pushes and pulls, rotator cuff. You're going to do quad, hamstring, glutes. You're going to do forearm work, maybe neck work. You're going to do everything that you know. And then the calves were just like, oh, you train those when you do jumps, and you train those when you do running. They get a ton of foot contact, so they're fine. And okay, but like, why do we take this whole area of the body and we're just like, we don't need to do calf raises? Because I think it's like, oh, that's a bodybuilding thing. We need bigger calves, but it's like, actually, maybe that's why we're running into more Achilles tendinopathy and Achilles ruptures, is because we're not treating the calves and Achilles like a strength coach. We're just saying, oh, that takes care of itself. But anyways, yeah, if you could go on to kind of what goes on in a CrossFit, the typical person in a person's CrossFit training.
Yeah, I mean, I can say with absolute confidence that I competed at a high level for 12 years, and I don't think I ever did a calf raise, weighted or unweighted for that matter. So that knock on wood, I never had any Achilles ruptures. I had a bit of tendinopathy at times, but yeah, so I think the typical, obviously with CrossFit, there's sort of like, we're going to speak about the person that is training with the intent of competing. In the same way, there's snowboarders that, snowboard recreationally, they're not competing. But with CrossFitters, you have both, some that are just doing CrossFit to stay healthy. But if you're looking to compete, kind of the movements you're going to see, like, athletes are going to be running. I wouldn't say a ton of sprinting. It's more preparing for like anywhere from a mile to a 5K is sort of the distance and the speed of running you're typically doing. You'll do shuttle runs. So you'll do like 25-foot shuttle runs. But again, those aren't super fast. It's usually more of like an aerobic. Hey, you're going to do shuttle runs for like 3 minutes, and you go do burpees, you go do pull-ups, you come back. Some box jumps rebounding, but again, like I said, that's gone out of style in the last, quite frankly, 10 years. Sort of since 2016, you've seen less and less rebounding box jumps in competition. And then the preparation mirrors that, where you will see less and less coaches programming, hey, do these rebounding. They'll usually say, do these box jumps, but you have to step down. You'll see a lot of jump roping. So you'll see people doing, a couple hundred double unders, triple unders, crossovers a week. You do a lot of burpees. So like kind of like a lower intensity plyometric. So you'll do burpees up onto a box and you'll jump off the box and land on 2 feet, but then you'll drop back down into a burpee. So you're not getting like a rebound out of that, but there is some like harder contact from landing off the top of the box, or just burpees over like a dumbbell or over a bar. So you're just staying really low and kind of shuffling. And then, if we're looking at just the lower body, a ton of Olympic weightlifting, right? So, cleans, snatches, and then all the stuff that goes with that. You'll do deadlifts, you'll do clean pulls, you'll do lots of front squats, lots of back squats, of a variety of weights. So everything from maxing out to heavy fives to workouts with, 100 squats or 200 squats. So a lot of squat repetition, a lot of deadlift repetition, sandbag cleans, some heavy carries like yoke carries and stuff like that. But really if we're looking at the lower body and, specifically sort of the calf, hamstring, quad, it's a lot of repetitive weightlifting. And then, you've got you have plyometrics, but people aren't typically training their jump. Like people aren't really doing depth drops or depth drops to jumps. People aren't really doing any, like explosive broad jumps. It's sort of like repetitive, just explosive enough sort of training. Like, okay, get the work done, right? Get to this 2-foot high box or maybe a 2.5-foot high box. But not like really, really demanding. It's more repetitive. Like, hey, you have to be able to do 100 of these, broad jumps or 100 of these box jumps or 300 double unders. So it's like expressing just enough power to continue to do that work and sort of stay, relaxed in your heart rate. And then you'll see some people do, like supersets where it's maybe like a front squat directly into like a seated box jump, right? Like you'll see some intentional sort of like explosive work there, like jumping work. But yeah, that's kind of, and then as far as frequency of training, the high level CrossFitters are training, 2 times a day, 5-6 days a week, big training sessions. And then, as you go down, it's more like 5 days a week, for an hour or 2 hours a day. And so the frequency of all those movements kind of just fluctuates depending on how much total training time.
Okay. So I wanted to say, so when you were talking about the running versus sprinting, like not a whole lot of sprinting, a lot of running, a lot of mileage, probably a lot of like foot contacts, even like the double unders and the more like volume plyometric training. And so if you look at there is something specific about the Achilles, because I don't want to have this that whole thing I said, there's a little bit nuance to me being like, we don't train the calves and Achilles like a strength coach. So then you could think, oh, are they detrained then? Because we're just acting, or do they take care of themselves? But they do. So something specific about the Achilles and the calf is, to use this as an example, if you look at someone who has a hamstring strain injury, like a sprinter, part of their rehab kind of early on, depending on the grade of it, can be slow jogging or just jogging and increasing the speed a little bit. And then once you get to a maximal sprint, that's when the hamstring really turns on. So it's almost like there's not a whole lot of hamstring when you're low level, medium level. And then when you get to high end sprinting, the hamstring really kicks in. The calf and the Achilles is not like that at all. So even when you're doing slow jogging, slow running, there's crazy loads going through the gastroc, soleus, Achilles. And then it does get more as you sprint faster. And it's the same thing with jumping. So like low level jumping is going to be a lot of calf and Achilles. And then as you increase the intensity of the jump, going to be more calf and Achilles. So you are getting a ton of training, just hearing all of the volumes that you get of foot contacts, the foot hitting the ground and then coming off, foot hitting the ground, coming off. It's a ton of load on the calves and Achilles, which is different than something like a hamstring or something like maybe even a quad. So like a lot of the other muscles in your body or tendons, they get stressed the higher the outputs are. And if you're doing low level outputs, there's really not a whole lot of stress. But the Achilles and the calf is always going to be stressed if you're doing any form of running, any form of foot contact. So yeah, you are getting a lot of training. And that's probably why someone like you've had a successful CrossFit career and you never had to do a calf raise, because you had you were getting a lot of calf and Achilles development. But it still can be approached from a perspective of strengthening the calf better and then giving the Achilles a bit different load. I was going to ask before I go on to like what I kind of suggest as the what people should be doing to load their calves and Achilles to stay healthier. With that running, because the Achilles is kind of complex. How you have the lateral gastroc, medial gastroc, and the soleus muscle. So 3 muscles, and they all have their individual tendons. So the Achilles tendon has 3 subtendons, and they twist maybe like 90 degrees before they go into the calcaneus. So if you're running in a straight line, it's like you see this with bone research. If you run in a straight line, the bone grows out in pretty much just one direction. But if you play a multi-directional sport, the bones grow at like a 360 360 direction because you're getting variation of loading. When you talk about running, like all that volume of running that CrossFitters have to do, is a lot of that kind of in a straight line, or is there any like inclines, trail runs, running around a track, any other directions?
I would say, I mean, it depends on the athlete. I mean, I started to make an effort later in my career as I had some like minor calf or like foot issues. To my physio's recommendation was like, Brent, like just go run on a trail, run on and for it sounds like for that same reason. But in CrossFit, we tend to go forward, sometimes up. And that's pretty much it. So there's going to be a lot of athletes that either they go to the track or they're just running on the road or the sidewalk. And it's like, okay, I'm getting in my mileage. I'm doing, 5 by 1 mile on a certain pace with 3-minute rest, or a workout. You mix running in. So you'll do burpees, pull-ups, go run a 400 meter for multiple rounds. And so that 400 meter is kind of around the block or whatever, around the building kind of thing. So yeah, a lot of running straight ahead. And then, yeah, like a lot of running straight ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that kind of lends itself to, because you have those 3 subtendons, you have different aspects of the Achilles tendon, and depending on what you're doing, you're going to load certain aspects more than others. So yeah, if you're doing the same thing, it's almost like you're going to be loading certain portions of the tendon and then not loading certain portions of the tendon as well. But it's like you're making the stronger aspect of the tendon stronger and the weaker aspect of the tendon weaker because you're doing the same exact thing. So I think running a straight line, one thing is like, if you're doing so much of your volume with that, and you could get away with doing something in a little bit different direction, or even running on maybe something a little bit uneven or something, there's a whole different load stress on the Achilles, which is gonna offer more thorough development of the Achilles. And then, yeah, with the jumping, I guess, I don't know, the jumping exercises, are those pretty set with CrossFit, of like you're doing the double unders, you're doing like box jump type exercises, or are there things where people are doing, like you said, maybe like more broad jumps, or are they doing like deeper squat jumps or anything like that? Because all these things can offer a different stimulus to the Achilles.
Yeah, it's a pretty short list for most people, right? It's very much like, what are the types of things we're typically seeing in competition? And then you're just accumulating a lot of repetitions of those. And so the coaches will sort of have this list, whether it's somewhere written or just in their head. They're like, oh, let's do a jump. And so it's really a box jump straight ahead, a box jump over, so back and forth. And like when I said broad jumps, I'm sure, if, there'd be a lot of athletes that like, oh, I haven't really done a broad jump in 3 years, because although and they could do that instead of like, hey, today, instead of doing, adding more variety, or like, hey, you're going to intentionally jump, laterally broad jump and then laterally jump back. Like you could do those things. People don't do those things. Like I said, it's up and it's forward, it's onto a box. If you're getting in your jumping reps, you're typically doing double unders, maybe single unders or crossover double unders, or maybe triple unders. Again, that's just up. And then with the box jump, it's either up onto the box or repeatedly over, which is either, you're either going to be kind of going laterally, but it's sort of like a 45-degree angle. That's like 99% of the people that are CrossFitters. Those would be the 4 ways that they jump over the course of a year.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty low variety. Variety.
So yeah, it's the same with the running thing. Is like, if there could be a little bit more variety, you'd get more different stress on the Achilles. This whole idea of like, if you do the same thing, the strong areas get strong. If you do something else, the weak areas can potentially get stronger if you give some variation. So, Okay, so kind of hearing all that training and then just having this lack of looking at it as a strength coach, the calf raises, like it's the the simple thing or the great thing with training the calf and Achilles from a strength perspective is there's very few options for how to do it because
Yeah.
that joint you just need to do calf raises. But the way people mess it up is the loading because we just don't load it enough. Um Sorry to go again, but before I go to the loading perspective, do you guys have, there's this idea that I have in my world of just trying to dunk basketballs or working with basketball, this idea of structural development of sure we have the skill of the sport. We want to get better at the outputs of jumping and cutting and everything, like the nervous system benefits, the outputs, whatnot. But this idea of structure, of this idea of the actual structures of the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the bones, and then giving. So for me with the patellar tendon, is I'll specifically add quad exercises, really heavy quad exercises to get the quad muscle stronger, but then really heavy so that it can actually get into the tendon and I can actually strengthen the tendon because you need something heavy to strengthen the patellar tendon. So I look at this as a structural development piece, isolating the quad, isolating the tendon, and training in that way. In the CrossFit world, is there any of this like philosophy of we're doing this thing for structural development of this specific area, or do you guys, is that not really a thing?
I'd say depends. I would definitely say there is structured development if you look at the shoulder. Like we do a ton of shoulder variety. And so people will do, like face pulls or external rotation because we're doing tons of like handstand walks or overhead squats or, push-ups. Like your shoulders, like your labrum, your rotator cuff can really take a beating in this sport. And so it's common in like how the sport is trained and coached that serious or even moderately serious athletes will have like usually it'll be written in like shoulder prehab they might call it, and so it's 3x20 this 3x20 that, like external rotation, maybe even internal rotation strengthening. So that's common. I would say like the three most common injuries in CrossFit are like low back, knees, and shoulders. And so because of that, there is definitely like a culture and you see that where people are doing strengthening specifically around the low back, whether it's specific glute stuff or like, maybe back extensions or like Jefferson curls, Jefferson deadlifts, right? With the like that. Some single leg work. And then for the knees, I think the way in which people, work on knee pain could, again, that maybe that's a different podcast. But so that's kind of seeped in. I mean, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that was uncommon. It's like, hey, you go in the gym, you do CrossFit, right? You do the thing. In the same way with basketball, it's like you go in, you play basketball, you dunk, you leave. What are we talking about? And then if you're in the gym for basketball, what do? I'm going to move kind of in the same way, right? I'm either going to do power cleans or heavy squats or jump on a box. And so there's still a bit of that, but you are seeing more of, I mean, I guess we would call it like accessory or prehab is kind of how we would use it, which is the idea of I'm going to do these movements. Although they're never going to be tested in competition, I'm doing them to supplement. And so, yeah, you'll see people doing like some specific, whether it's like hamstring curls or leg extensions or, some specific glute work to kind of shore up against injuries, whether you're hoping they don't come or they've happened before. But yeah, very little, because the Achilles is, like I said, it's this sort of like scary black box of like, well, I hope I don't get one of those. Anyway, that's why I'm doing this, to hopefully educate some people that maybe there are some specific things you can do. Whereas the knee, the low back, the shoulder, there's like, there's cultures around that. There's podcasts around that. There's probably programs you can buy. Like, are you a CrossFitter with knee pain? And like, do this. So it's not out of the question. I think part of it too is looking at like access to equipment to really load up the calf is going to, not everyone has a safety squat bar. Not everyone has the machine, like the two calf raise machines you see in a Globo gym, whether it's the seated or the standing. So, they're going to have a harder time like loading up the calf in some
Yeah.
cases. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay. Good to know that there's actually like a structural development piece for other aspects of the body because,
Yep.
yeah, if it was the 10, 15 years ago where it's like you just go in and do CrossFit and then it's like, okay, let's do something for structural development of the calf and Achilles, it'd be just like, what, why? Where's this coming out of? But yeah, as long as you have it from the shoulder, there's probably a community that understands the shoulder, the knee, the low back. So yeah, the same exact thing can exist for the Achilles. And before going on to like the slow, heavy loading. So I think the way I look at the way to get more prehab, the similar with the shoulder, low back, knee, some prehab stuff for the Achilles and calf, is going to be slow loading. It's going to be slow, heavy loading. And the way that I think people should look at this is you have that Achilles tendon attached to the calf muscles. But when you're doing everything that you talked about earlier with CrossFit, running, double unders, jumping over boxes, the calf muscles, so in all those things, those are fast movements. So the calf muscles are not going through this whole so the ankle joint is going through a range of motion. It's going through dorsiflexion and plantar flexion and all that. But because it's so fast, the calf muscles are working more isometric. So they're kind of just squeezing. And the Achilles tendon is doing the length changes. So the Achilles tendon is working like a rubber band, how it's lengthening and then contracting, lengthening, or it's not contracting, but it's lengthening and going back, lengthening, going back. It's like a passive rubber band. And that's all possible because the calf muscles are just kind of squeezing. So the calf muscle length, the length of that muscle is not changing a whole lot when you're doing all the dynamic fast things. So why I say slow, heavy loading is when you do slow, heavy loading, now you're getting the calf muscle to actually go through a length change. So it's stretching, the muscle is stretching out and then it's contracting, it's stretching out, it's contracting. And then you're also getting a bit of a length change on the tendon. But when you talk about doing something dynamic, that is a really tendon heavy. The movement is coming from the tendon when you're doing something dynamic. When you do something slow, that movement, if you're going up and down in a slow manner, that's more so happening from the muscle. And then that tendon is getting somewhat of a length change, but it's not the same damaging, stressful movements for the tendon. So when it comes to that's the way that's what's going to be happening when you're doing slow, heavy calf raises. So the way I look at some form of prehab is I'm always kind of a minimum effective dose person, especially with the volumes and demands of what a typical CrossFit week would look like. So you don't need to throw in 60 minutes of calf training a day or even in a week. I think at least twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week, doing something for the calves. And this could just be like at the very end of a session, just throw it in, or you could even do it before, just kind of like a prehab thing, just to make sure you're getting some stimulus a different stimulus in the calf muscles and a different stimulus in the Achilles tendon. So because you have the 2 calf muscles, or the 3 calf muscles, I guess, you have the lateral gastroc, medial gastroc, and the soleus. When it comes to doing a calf raise, if your leg is straight, so like think of doing a standing calf raise or a calf raise in like a leg press with your leg straight or in a Smith machine, that is developing all the calf muscles. So it's developing the gastrocs, it's developing the soleus, and you're getting a really big pull on the tendon, like a more of a healthy, slower pull on the tendon. So that's what I would say first, is someone needs to be doing. And it has to be single leg, because we're talking about structural development. We're not talking about trying to maximize your outputs. If you wanted to do as heavy as possible on a calf raise and just do for output, like try to put up as much weight as possible, then you do bilateral. But we're not doing bilateral. We're trying to develop the structures of the calf muscles and the Achilles tendon. So that's why you go single leg, so that you can isolate one leg over the other, because people are going to have one leg stronger than the other one, or they're going to be able to find some discrepancy, especially if there's already existing pain. So a straight leg calf raise is going to be the first thing I go to. And then I just look at it like a strength coach, where if you're taking someone who's now, you're not detrained in the calves and Achilles because you're doing so much other stuff, but you are detrained in the action of slow, heavy calf training. So I could take you, who's done your whole life has been running and jumping and CrossFit training, and put you on a slow, heavy calf raise, and you're probably going to look pretty pitiful because you're just detrained from it. So it's like, I don't take you and say, we need to go as heavy as possible, sets of 5 immediately. It's more so like, you're so detrained from this, let's go towards the strength endurance end, so you can kind of get comfortable, develop the coordination with the muscle to work the movement. So I would say a few sets, like 3 sets, 15 reps or so, on each side. And then over time, maybe you do those 15 reps for like a month, you work that down to like 10 reps, then you work that down to like 5 reps. And then you could kind of live at this 5 rep range. And this is going to be slow, heavy calf training. So it's like, um, you're going to go up pretty controlled, and then you're going to control down the eccentric, go up, control down the
Yeah.
eccentric. And that's a straight leg, because you can develop all the calf muscles, you can develop the Achilles tendon really well. And when we're talking about structural development of the calves and Achilles, if you were to just stand on the flat ground, and then do a calf raise, that's not gonna do a whole lot for your calf and Achilles, because if you start on the flat and you come up into plantar flexion, the calves are really weak in plantar flexion, and the Achilles tendon, it doesn't have a whole lot of stretch in it. And the way to adapt to the Achilles tendon is to get stretch in it. That's the only way to adapt the tendon, is to stretch the tendon. And you don't stretch the tendon by just cranking it into end range dorsiflexion. You stretch the tendon by getting a huge pull from the muscle. The muscle's pulling the tendon, and then the joint position is pulling the tendon. So instead of doing it on the flat, you want to get your foot on somewhat of like a plate or somewhat of a wedge or something, so that you can get down into a level of dorsiflexion. When you get into dorsiflexion and you're going to do a weighted calf raise, you're going to try to come up onto the ball of your foot or onto your toes. That level of dorsiflexion, going from dorsiflexion to kind of the mid-range position, that is when your calf and Achilles are getting the most adaptation. That's when they're the strongest. That's when your calf is the strongest, and that's when your tendon's the most stretched out. So doing a calf raise in a standing position off of a step where you're going into dorsiflexion, you're going to come up, and you don't have to come up as high as you possibly can, because again, you're super weak at the top. If you're going to try to make every single calf raise like I need to go all the way to dorsiflexion and all the way to plantar flexion, you're just going to deload the calf raise, because you're focused on the plantar flexion range, which is like your muscles don't work well at all. They're super weak there, and you're not getting any adaptation. So I think you could look at it and say, let's do those 3 sets of 15. Let's get into that really good dorsiflexion, control it down in dorsiflexion, come up. And if you can't get like all the way plantar flexion, who cares? You're getting that range that is the sweet spot, which is dorsiflexion into like mid-range and a little bit of plantar flexion. And having people work there, like coming up in that calf raise, controlling it down, coming up in that calf raise, controlling it down, just keeping it a slow tempo. And then trying to load it heavier and heavier over time. Now you're going to have to tell me the equipment demands, because the best way to do it is in a Smith machine, because there's no balance requirements, and you can just keep stacking on plates over time as you get stronger. But if you have to do it, people that are starting out right now, they're probably going to start out body weight, doing 3 sets of 15 off of a little bit of a step. Starting body weight is really going to, like, it's going to burn the calves. It's going to get you pretty fatigued there. But that's a good start. And then you could start by like adding a dumbbell, holding a dumbbell, maybe holding onto something for support. But over time, as I talked about, you're doing sets of 15 to kind of get that strength endurance, and then you're going to work down to sets of 10, then you're going to work down to sets of 5. You're not going to be able to hold the dumbbell heavy enough. So you're going to need to put a barbell, maybe even like a safety bar is good, because you can hold on to something for supports. But it's this whole idea of like, you have to make this kind of like a less quote unquote functional and like more artificial way to load, because that calf and Achilles, when you're jogging, I think the numbers on the soleus, so like when you're jogging, it goes through like 6 times body weight loads are going through the soleus. When you're sprinting, I think it's like 8 or 9 times body weight going through the soleus, going through the Achilles tendon. And it's like, just think, like, you need to load really heavy in the weight room if you're even going to try to get close to some type of load like that, because the calves are that strong. So that's you need to work the weights up as you work the weights down. But yeah, just hearing all that, what do you make of kind of things I just said there, as far as
I mean, that was all awesome. That was awesome. Super valuable. I think, yeah, definitely loading it, like you said, starting unweighted, making sure people are getting into that deep end range of motion, so they're, as much flex in the calf as possible, I think is going to be really important. And then, yeah, you don't have to go like tippy toe like a ballerina, like you said. You don't have to do that. That's good to know. And then, yeah, I think for most people, equipment is going to be challenging. Yeah, like holding a dumbbell, using a strap so you can get up to like a heavy dumbbell. But again, eventually it's like even 150 pound dumbbell is just not going to be enough once you get up into fives and once it's become more trained. Yeah, safety squat bar, because it can just rest there and you can have your hands on the rack. You can end up getting that up to, 200 pounds, 300, 400 pounds. With the foot, you want the foot straight.
Yeah, straight. And then I think the way to think about it is just kind of trying to keep that weight like balance between the first and fifth met heads. So you're not going to be on
Between
like,
the
yeah, you're not going to be on the big toe or on the pinky toe, but on the kind of the bases where the met heads are. And if you start going up on the toes, it just becomes like you're just not hitting the calves and Achilles as well. You might be hitting more of like the plantar fascia and stuff like that. So it's more like, yeah, keep the weight there. And then, yeah, try to keep that ankle in line with the foot. So maybe, I think in research, they'll say like the second race or like the second toe. If you think of like keeping the weight like through the second toe, like kind of in the middle there. Yeah, because when you start to, you'll see people, if they really focus on getting into end range plantar flexion, they'll just kind of supinate the foot and get to the pinky toe. Yeah, they'll kind of get to, and it's just like, let's just keep the weight more in line because we're not thinking about like, we're not trying to match the biomechanics of running and sprinting. We're thinking about developing the calf and Achilles tendon structures, which is like if you keep the weight really midline and keep the load on those structures, that's what we're going for. So trying to keep it straight is going to be best. Now there are some arguments if someone was a little bit more advanced further down with their calf training, they could do things where like they're turning the toes in or they're turning the toes out. But I just feel like it's just kind of irrelevant. I think if what really is relevant is actually loading your calf in the first place, loading your calf with intention in the first place and keeping it as simple as possible. So yeah, I think that, and then I think too, if you're going like doing those 15 reps and people are going to get really good at it because it's more so just a coordination thing. They're going to get good real quick and then they can start loading the weights. Yeah. And then if they actually do get to a point where like they can't actually, well, they should all get to a point where like they're holding a heavy dumbbell and it's just not enough load. The point where they would think I haven't mastered this yet, I need to stay here for a little bit longer. They're going to think that because they're focusing too much on getting into plantar flexion, But if they really have this idea that like dorsiflexion into a little bit of plantar flexion is the range that you need to focus on, like that is a full rep. I use the analogy earlier this week talking to one of my friends where it's like if you go to like a typical gym and you're doing like a squat exercise, if you don't hit parallel, everyone's going to look at you like that's not a clean rep. That's the form police is going to say that's not a full rep. It's the same thing with calf raises. If you did a calf raise like I'm talking about, everyone would be like, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You need to get all the way up onto plantar flexion. And it's well, just do a little bit of digging into the anatomy and the way that the calf and Achilles works, and you'll know that plantar flexion, that top range plantar flexion is kind of just a waste of time. So, and especially think of this too, what we talked about to start, that rebound box jump, and that every time when someone is rupturing their Achilles, they're in that dorsiflex position. They're in that weakened position. No one's rupturing their Achilles when they're in full plantar flexion. That's not the compromised position. So, it's just, that's the compromised position. That's where things can really break, but that's also where you're the strongest. So yeah, we need to train in that position. On top of that, I think giving that one exercise is good. If people can do that and they can like be doing that 2-3 times a week, like I said, 3 sets, single leg, 15 reps starting, then 10 reps, 5 reps over time. And then just living at that 5 reps and trying to progress there. Another one is a seated calf. So like people have probably all seen the seated calf, and the difference with the seated calf is the gastroc, the gastroc muscles go all the way up to the knee. So when you bend the knee, those muscles don't work as well. They're kind of just in a range of motion where those muscle fibers just can't line up as well to produce force. So the seated calf is more so just good for the soleus, not a whole lot of gastroc going on. That doesn't mean it's not like useless. It's still very good. So if there was an opportunity, and the best way to do that is with a seated calf machine. The second option would be, you could put like a barbell over the knees with a pad, because then you could really load up the barbell. And I like to do a Smith machine. If you you can use a barbell, it's just the balance gets a little bit iffy. Putting a dumbbell on the knee is just not going to be enough load. You could even put like a 150-pound dumbbell, and it's just not enough load, because if you're doing the same thing, you're on a step, you're going into dorsiflexion, and you're coming up to like that mid range, maybe a little bit higher, and you're focusing on that. You could put a 150-pound dumbbell on my knee, and I could crank that out for so many reps. It's just a waste of time, because that soleus is way too strong for something like that. So, the seated calf is good. Putting a barbell over the knees, and then if you have to put a barbell, and you with a pad, and you don't have a Smith machine, or even if you do have a Smith machine, you could just do bilateral, and you could do the same sets and reps. So like early on, if you want to do it in conjunction, if you have enough time to do the standing, just do the standing. If you have enough time to do standing and seated, you could do standing and then seated, like as the cherry on top, and load it in the same way, like 3 sets of 15, work it down to 3 sets of 10, and work it down to 3 sets of 5. Those are just, they're not hard numbers, but it's just what I'm saying right now. This idea of like strength, endurance, and then working down to more maximal strength. And yeah, that's solely, you can really start to load that up. So if you look at kind of a number that people could think about, if you look at a lot of research that come out of the UK with soccer players, or football, I guess they play, but in the States, soccer, Achilles tendons, Achilles ruptures, or Achilles tendinopathy, Achilles ruptures all the time. When they get on a force plate, and they push maximally into like a seated calf raise, they're pushing into a belt, so they're pushing as hard as they possibly can. The number they want those people to hit is 2 times body weight. So they're pushing with 2 times body weight off a single leg, just for like a maximum isometric, as hard as they can push for like those few seconds. I did it recently, and I was just around 2 times body weight. So it just kind of paints this picture that your soleus is capable of producing so much force when you're in a seated position. So, and when you're doing that seated calf raise, you're trying to get into as much dorsiflexion as you can, because that's where that soleus is the strongest. So, to me, when I go to the gym and I'm doing the seated calf raise with the pads, it tells me my soleus is capable of producing 2 times body weight. But if I'm focused so much on getting full range of motion, dorsiflexion, and plantar flexion, I'm just going to offload the exercise, and it's going to become like such a light loaded thing. So when I go to the gym and I'm using the seated calf raise, I'll do bilateral, because it's just so uncomfortable on the knees. You know, the pad, even if it's really padded, it's so uncomfortable on the knees. Yeah. I'm just loading it with as many plates as I can, and I'm going to be doing like pretty much all the way dorsiflexion, and then just coming up to like mid-range as high. I'm always coming as high as I can, always, but I'm also like, I need to load this as heavy as I possibly can. And my plantar flexion range will suffer, but I know that I'm training my soleus and my Achilles tendon way better than if I was to do one plate and focus on full range of motion all the way up, because it's just irrelevant. So yeah, I think the standing or the straight leg calf raise is the first, the most essential. And then if you have time to do the seated, you can go ahead and do the seated kind of on top of that. And just 2 to 3 times a week, like it's so simple just to add those things in. You're going to add so much more strength and resilience to your Achilles and calf muscles.
Really cool. With does it matter shoes, just like whatever shoes you usually train in? Should you, if possible, would you use like a barefoot trainer? Does that really matter?
As far as when you're doing the calf raises, or
yeah, when you do calf raises.
Yeah, I think well, it's more so maybe like personal preference. I think you could kind of do whatever. Yeah, I do. I'll kind of do both, and it doesn't matter a whole lot, because it's like the points of contact are pretty basic. It's like you're going on the 1st and 5th met heads. You're trying to kind of keep it there. You can do that barefoot. You can do that with shoes on. I think you kind of, when you're training the calves and Achilles, you kind of want to think of the toe. The toes are kind of useless. Like, you don't want to be pushing through the toes ever. You just want to be 1st and 5th met heads, and that's where you're pushing the weight through. Yeah, once you start getting to the toes, you just start recruiting different muscles, different tendons, things that are like, these are not the things that we really care about. So yeah, I don't think the shoes matter a whole lot. I will say, I guess before, if there are people, I guess, a question for you though, if you could answer, Achilles tendinopathy, is that common in CrossFit? Achilles tendon pain?
I would say probably not. I've had some, but I would say not nearly as common as shoulder, low back, knee.
Okay.
But I would say not too common.
Because there are two types of Achilles tendon pain, I guess, just to say it, because I know people out there probably do have it. There's mid portion, which is like 2/3 of people get mid portion, and then 1/3 get insertional, and insertional is all the way down at the calcaneus. So if you think of the calcaneus being here in the Achilles tendon, if you go into dorsiflexion, you get this really big wrapping around of the Achilles tendon around the calcaneus. So if someone has insertional Achilles tendon pain and they're going to do really deep dorsiflexion calf raises, it might be aggravating. So for those people, I would just be like, let's just maybe not go super deep into dorsiflexion. But for everyone else who's trying to really strengthen the Achilles and calves, you can go into deep dorsiflexion. That's where you can get the most adaptation of those muscles. But yeah, if the insertional Achilles tendon is not an issue, because if someone comes to me with insertional Achilles tendon pain, I'm like, let's stay away from dorsiflexion for a while. Stay away from it because tendon pains take a long time to settle. Stay away from it for a few months. Let's work the calves outside of deep dorsiflexion. Sure, it's a little bit less good for the calves and Achilles development, but pain is in the way. So we need to get the pain out of the way, and then we can go back to like really loading that thing up. Yeah.
With tempo, basically, 2-3 seconds lower, 2-3 seconds up. Is there any value to pausing at the bottom or the top, or just like kind of go into? You don't want to bounce out of the bottom, but
yeah, I'm not too like strict on tempos. I think just this idea of just keeping it controlled on the way down. You can pause too. I think, you could add a pause at the bottom. I think, 2-3 seconds on the way down to keep it slow, to keep the calf muscles going through like an eccentric, and not making it. If you were to do the calf raise really quick, it would just become like the calf muscles are squeezing and the tendons getting all that quick, violent length change. And that's what you don't want, because you want it to be kind of a healthy stimulus for the tendon. So just going 2 to 3 seconds down. Probably a little bit of a pause, so you're not jumping out of the bottom, a little bit of a pause there, and then maybe 2 to 3 seconds on the way up. I think if you're loading it as heavy as you can, that concentric, it's going to be hard to do that 2 to 3 seconds. You're going to like need to give everything you can. So it's like, if it's heavy enough, it's going to be slow in the first place, and then just slow it on the way down. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to hold at the top either. You can as well. I guess it's more so like when we're talking the structural development piece, just like when you're doing structural development for like the shoulders and the low back and the quads, it's more so like feel, you want to get a good feel. So when you're doing the calf raises, you want to get a good feel that you're really contracting the calves. So often you get a better feel if you slow it down, if you maybe get a little holds, like control it on the way up, maybe even hold it a little bit at the top, because it just lets you feel like you're contracting the calves better. You're getting a better feel, better fatigue at the calves. So yeah, I'm all for just slowing it down, adding short pauses if you want to. Just make sure it's not a jerky, quick thing.
Yeah. I think we're used to seeing like tempo, like at 2 on XO or whatever, right? Is kind of specifically for squatting and maybe for like cleans and stuff, or clean pulls. And so, I think seeing that as like almost like a at 2-1, 2-1 or something, where it's like 2 seconds down, 1 second pause, 2 seconds up, 1 second pause, just to make sure that people aren't no bouncing out of the bottom. Is that, you'll see some CrossFitters, it's like, 2 seconds down, and they'll kind of like 1, 2, and then they'll bounce up. It's like, you're kind of missing the point of that tempo squat. Maybe the ego gets in the way a bit, but okay. I think I'm looking through my notes. This is all really good. I think.
Yeah. Sorry to add on that. That whole bounce.
No, please.
That whole bounce too with the squat is like that's the same as like a plyometric. It's like a stretch. It's like a stretch shortening cycle. That's how you get that elastic recoil out of the tendon, is when you bounce out of the bottom. And we're talking about developing the structures of the calves, getting a good stimulus on the calves and the Achilles tendon. And it's like when you bounce out of the bottom, you're like hiding away from it, you're shying away from getting that stimulus there. So yeah, definitely slow on the way down. I know exactly what you're saying. You give someone a tempo who's like more of an elastic, explosive athlete, and it's just like they're going to cheat it and bounce out of the bottom. And it's like, if you add a pause, then they can't bounce anymore. Actually, sometimes they'll pause and then they'll still get a bounce because they'll
do a little more. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that as well. I think that's I'm just going to quickly look at my, that's all really good. And then I guess like, when you look at something like, specifically the rebounding box jump. So obviously we have add some more variety into your jumping, add some more variety into your running if you can, add in the calf raises. I think some people have to get a little creative with their setups because the safety bar is more common, but not super common. You can definitely hold a dumbbell, but yeah, they're going to have to add a lot of weight to a weight vest or something.
Yeah, to add on that, because I
yeah.
don't like the barbell. If they're gonna put a barbell and try to do calf raises, I don't
No,
like it because the
safety.
balance. You can't balance,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, that's why
Yeah.
safety bar
Yeah.
is good because you can hold on to something. You want to be able to hold so you can get all that load, and there's no balance issue. If
Yeah. Yeah.
people
You
do
don't,
barbell calf raises and it's like they're just gonna fall over the whole time. It's like you can't load that thing at all, and you're not getting
yeah.
good load through the calf and Achilles.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. I've done, I'm doing a little more jumping again now, and so I've been doing some calf raises myself. And yeah, the safety bar works well, but yeah, there's no way you could load it with a normal barbell. Yeah. So when we think about like rebounding box jumps, if you're an athlete that's not training for competition, but you're athletic and you kind of want to stay in shape, probably just kind of like doing like doing false steps, like, hey, maybe just kind of avoid that. But if you're thinking, okay, I'm competing, there's a chance that there's rebounding box jumps. I'm doing my calf raises. I've varied up my jumping. Should you be gradually adding in higher and more intense and more reps for rebounding box jumps? Or is it like, hey, just avoid it, knock on wood? What do you think that looks like?
Yeah. Okay. So, um, with something like that, I think it's always like, let's keep the end in mind of like, what do I need to be prepared for? And that's the kind of tells you where you should start. So, um, yeah, so there's no point in something that's kind of like dangerous, injurious like that, where it's like, let's try to exceed the capacities of what we need to do. It's more so like, let's just like what we need to do and then progress from there. So if it was to be something that they have to do, how high is that box? Is it going to be set at 24 inches? Is the end of it?
Typically, men is 24 inches, women's 20. Sometimes it'll go a little higher, 30-inch for men, 24 for women. Again, with that, usually what happens is you can if it's over, most of the time people will be landing kind of like in a squat. So it's not like if they're not like fully upright, standing tall, and then their entire body's jumping down 24 inches. It's like their hips aren't moving that much space because the hips, you're kind of tucking your knees to your chest. But yeah, anyway, 24 inches for men, 20 for women is kind of like the norm. But depending on the workout, you might be like fully upright standing. So my whole 220 pounds is going to be like bounding down and rebounding into the floor at 24-inch depth drop, right?
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if that's the end, I think you approach that like a strength coach and just start low level and then build it up. So like, yeah, you could do unless it in the practical world, they would kind of get stupid and be like, why am I doing this? But if you a lower box, doing it off a
Yeah.
lower box, and yeah, accumulating some reps there. Cause it's like, so we talked, maybe it's a good time to say this. We talked before we got on air of like, there's this idea of fatigue being more injurious, being bad for injuries. As
Yeah.
you get more fatigued, you're more likely to get injured. But also, as you get more fatigued, it's protective of injuries because your outputs are much less. So it's like your muscles don't have the same outputs to yank on tendons to rupture them. So in that sense, fatigue is protective. But when you take something like the rebound box jump, it's not protective anymore because you have to drop off this 24-inch box, and that's set. You can't change that 24-inch box. So you're going to be dropping off of that, and you have to deal with that. So if you're in a fatigue state, it's going to be more injurious. You don't have the fatigue protective effect unless the fatigue forced you to like drop off that box and really sink into it, with the hips or
Yeah.
something, like do it in a really inefficient way. Sure, that'd be protective for your Achilles because you're not going to be putting all that. You're going to be putting it through your knees and through your hips now. But if you're doing it for like time and trying to do it quick, it's going to be an injurious thing. So yeah, doing it off a lower box could be good. I think this could even offer in the warm up if you guys are like there's a warm up prior to the session. So one of my friends, Matt Watson, Plyometric, Plyos Plus or Plus Plyos, whatever his company is called, like the go-to guy for plyometrics. And you see people do like pogo hops, bilateral pogo hops forwards or like single leg, or they're doing all these variations of plyometrics. And it was him that I first saw doing like backwards plyometrics. So like instead of doing pogos forwards, you do pogos backwards, and it offers a different stimulus to the Achilles and calf, like maybe a little bit less. But adding on top of that, he's done like, for example, like maybe 2 forward, 1 back, 2 forward, 1 back, something like that.
Mm.
So if you could think that's kind of similar to like a rebound box jump where it's like your body is moving backwards and then you have to move forwards. Your body's moving backwards, then you have to move forwards. So if there was this idea that like we have to be ready for rebound box jumps, and just think of everything else in the typical CrossFit training, nothing is anything you're doing taking your body and moving it backwards and then forcing you to move forwards. And if you aren't doing anything like that, you're not going to be prepared for it if you're going to go do like the rebound box jump. And I guess the rebound box jump is going to be the best way to prepare for that, assuming you scale it in a safe manner. But you could also do things where you're maybe doing some plyometrics where you're having some backward, a little bit of backward movement into something forward. Just don't make it as dangerous, you know? Like, and what's to me is dangerous is like, there was an old video of a sprinter, Olympic sprinter, who was rehabbing, I think she was rehabbing her left Achilles tendinopathy, and she did a vertical jump into a sprint. So she landed, and then she landed with her healthy side, her right leg, and she tried to push off into a sprint, and she ruptured her healthy tendon, her right side healthy tendon. And I think I just look at that and I say, when the body is moving down, or if the body is moving backwards, and then you're going to push off and try to move forwards, if you already have like a weakened Achilles tendon or a weakened calf or something compromised, that's a pretty dangerous movement for the Achilles tendon. So I'm not really a fan of something that's like max effort like that. But I think if you did something like that, that's a little bit less effort. Like if you're going to do a vertical jump into like a forward, if you just do it at a lower intensity, it can offer kind of like a dangerous stimulus to the Achilles, but more so like it's preparing you for something that's dangerous. So like the rebound box jump. So yeah, I think scaling the rebound box jump, if that's something you got to be prepared for, you definitely better be doing it in training. But also you could be doing things like plyometrics where you're getting some backward or some vertical movement into something horizontal. And that's also going to prepare the Achilles tendon for something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's smart. When there was a time, personal anecdote where I had a bit of my Achilles was sore after rebounding box jumps in the 2019 event I did in Dubai. And after that, I made a conscious effort to include rebounding box jumps as a fairly regular part of my training, but at a lower intensity, lower rep range, sometimes lower height. So if I hadn't done them in a while, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go to like 6 inches or 12 inches and just do some reps, just nice and easy, like kind of roll through it, either as a warm up or, kind of after. Not like the first thing I did, but just as an easier part of my session. And yeah, in hindsight, I would have been doing more calf raises. But didn't know about that at the time. I just thought, oh, if I'm doing a less dangerous version of this thing that I'm afraid of, it's like I can build up some tolerance to it and build up some confidence. I just remembered something as you talked about that sprinter. I was reading something about this, might have been on your page, a high jumper, and how stiff and how strong their tendon was, like the amount of force was required to stretch it. There's like, thousands and thousands of pounds. And so it's that idea again of that, like, we're not trying to get onto our tippy toes with these calf raises. It's like you need a lot of load to get into like, the deep flex. And that load is what's going to, strengthen the tendon. And
yeah, that's,
over time.
Yes, that's, the way I think people could understand it a little bit more even is when you think of the muscle, adapting a muscle, and think of maybe like hypertrophy, getting a hypertrophy stimulus, you can get it from the mechanical tension aspect of like lifting heavy, and then from the metabolic stress aspect of like getting the metabolic byproducts. Everyone kind of appreciates those two as the hypertrophy stimulus. So like getting an adaptation out of a muscle, get a big burn in the area from high reps, or lift super heavy. And it's like you can get hypertrophy gains. When it comes to the tendon, that metabolic stress side doesn't really exist to making the tendon stronger and stiffer. Really, we want the tendon to be stiff. If the tendon's stiffer, it's gonna deform less when you stress it. It's gonna be a safer tendon if it's a stiffer tendon, a stronger tendon. So for the tendon, that metabolic stress side, so lifting light weights, getting a burn, it's good for everything else in your body, good for your muscles, probably good for other things in your tendon or other things but it's not going to stiffen up and strengthen your tendon. The only way to stiffen up and strengthen your tendon is to get that mechanical tension aspect, get a really big pull on the tendon. So if you look at numbers, and I'm kind of going to have to make these up because they're all over in the research. If you look at the Achilles tendon, and if you're just sitting at rest, let's say it's at a 0% stretch. If you stretch it like 15% of its resting length, it's going to snap. So like if the ultimate strain is 15%, that means we could strain it 14% and it's not going to snap. Or we could strain it 13 or 12, you could strain it all below that and it's not going to snap. If 15% is the limit, then that's just what it is. That's the ultimate strain. Strain is strain of the tendon. So in training, we basically have to look at, okay, 15%. We need to be like approaching up on that. If that's the number, we need to be approaching up on it. And you can get really high strains in the double digits, like 10 plus, if you're doing running, if you're doing sprinting, if you're doing plyometrics. When it comes to calf, let's take the example of static stretching. If you just stand there and try to do a deep dorsiflexion as far as you can, you'd think you're stretching the tendon because everyone knows that's stretching the body, but you might be stretching the tendon like 1% because it just doesn't, it's too stiff. So you're going to stretch the muscle. You're not going to be stretching the actual tendon. So you could hold that as long as you want. You could shove your knee as far forward as you want. The tendon is way stiffer than the muscle. You're just going to end up stretching the muscle. So that's like a 1%. So the way to get more of a stretch on the tendon is take that similar position of that deeper dorsiflexion stretch and then just add a ton of weight on that calf muscle. So like doing a calf raise where that calf muscle is creating all this torque. And that's how you get that strain to start going up. So it's going to go up. The heavier you lift, it's going to go up 4%, 5%, 6%, maybe 7%. So the heavier you lift, the more stretch you're getting on that tendon. So, and that stretch is the thing that's adapting the tendon over time to make it stiffer and stronger. So yeah, you need to, the first thing is getting to that dorsiflex position. And then the second is loading it up heavy enough. And that's how you're actually going to be stretching that thing. You gotta, yeah, when you start focusing on plantar flexion, you're just not going to stretch it. And it's really hard to stretch a tendon in a weight room. It's really easy to stretch a tendon when you move fast. It's really hard to stretch it when you move slow. So when you move slow, you got to be progressing the loads to it gets to a point where it's actually going to adapt the tendon to get stiffer and stronger.
Great. I want to, probably getting close to the natural conclusion of this. I want to ask one more question just about, let's say like basically if I had 24-hour notice, I'm like at a competition, whether I knew this in advance or not, I've got this workout with rebounding box jumps. So I'm a little like timid about it. What could I do? Is like soft tissue work on the calf or the arches or the hamstring or the quads or stretching or even like a specific warm up. What are the things I could do to reduce the likelihood of an Achilles rupture or an Achilles injury, knowing I've like, let's say other than the actual training, the weeks and the months of that, but the immediate event, what could I do in the lead up to that? Is there anything? It's like stay hydrated. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much make sure you're like feeling good and you're really well recovered. Yeah, you gotta make sure up to that point you've addressed everything and everything's in a good shape. Like I know we talked about calf raises and training the calf and Achilles specifically, but before we got on this recording, I was talking about addressing everything else in the body because thinking about so a lot of there's stories of people with calf issues, Achilles issues, and their calves and Achilles are super strong. But then if you make them isolate their knee extensors can be really weak. So the soleus, one of those big calf muscles, works in conjunction with the quads. So this is just a painted example. If your quads are super weak, you're just everything you're doing, you're just gonna be loading the calves more, and you're gonna be more at risk for a calf issue or an Achilles issue. So that's just one piece where it's like everything, it's a kinetic chain, the whole body's involved. So if you have one area of your body that's really fallen by the wayside, you're not going to be good. Just like the cardiovascular system. If you're not in shape, but you have super strong muscles, you're not going to be in a good shape. So yeah, you have to address everything up to that point. Like your whole body has to be well functioning. You don't want to be having any areas that are weaker than others because especially in this case, if your quads suck really bad, you're just going to be yanking on your calf and Achilles more, and you're going to be more at risk for an issue. As far as what to do, like the day of or days leading up, I'd just make sure it's all about recovery, fatigue management. Warming up enough. I see this more so. The Achilles ruptures are so rare, but at least when it comes to tendinopathy, I think the tendon pain progresses down the line, because if someone has tendon pain, they already have a structurally compromised tendon, and that tendon pain can lead to a rupture, or that tendon pain can go away, but the structure stays the same, and then they rupture later on in life. So it's more like I look at it like a continuum. And those people with the tendon pains, um, they take, for example, my patellar tendon pain. If I go cold and I should try to do a vertical, go try to do a dunk, it's going to blow up my knee so bad. But if I do 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of just whatever warm up in the world, I can go dunk and I'm fine. So it's this thing of like being cold. If you were to go into that rebound box jump with a cold calf and Achilles, that's gonna make it much more dangerous. So just making sure you're thoroughly warmed up is going to be a really safe thing for the tendons. But yeah, I think I'm a fan of soft tissue stuff. Assuming if it's that early on, I would make sure it's not like really stressful, like really.
Yeah, you don't need to be like digging in and
Yeah,
just
like really
mashing the
aggressive.
hell out of your calves. And
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think anything around those areas could be good, just to make sure things are like moving well. Yeah, hydrated. Nothing is really like getting stuck down or whatever. Because that Achilles tendon, you could even do some like light work on the Achilles tendon, because that tendon has a sheath around it that could kind of get stuck down. But I think it just goes to good common sense at that point. If you're the day of competition, you got rebound box jumps. Hopefully everything you've done in the months leading up has led you to a place where you're safe on that day. And then it's just common sense. Make sure you're sleeping good, make sure you have enough like fuel, and make sure you're warming up, because cold tendons are really dangerous tendons. If you're going to go do something stressful, you really want to make sure you warm up. And you could warm up with that specific activity too, to kind of get because we talked earlier that rupture happens when that calcaneus drops, and then the calf might engage a little bit too late. So it's like a coordination thing. So if you're going into anything cold, coordination sucks immediately. So if you want to like increase your coordination, just go do that specific task for a few reps, and your coordination is going to pick up, and it'll be much safer.
Yeah. Yeah, that all sounds good. I didn't expect any, magic bullet. Like if you do this one warm up, your likelihood will go down 220%. But yeah, just warm up thoroughly, gradually build in the same way. I mean, everyone, if CrossFitters listening are going to know, like, hey, if you're going to max out your snatch, like don't just go from 0 to 200 pounds and expect I'm going to hit 210 as my PR. Yeah, like gradually build up. And then the same would be, it's like, hey, warm up, do a couple light calf raises, do a little bit of jogging, do a little bit of double unders, maybe do a couple rebounding box jumps off 2 plates, 3 plates, 6 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches, build up to 24, get a little sweaty. Yeah. Make sure you're taking it seriously, and you're not just kind of cracking your knuckles. It's like, all right, I'll warm up the other movements, and then I'll just go do box jumps, and then I'll be good. And I think sometimes, I wouldn't say people are too guilty of that, but I think we're familiar with loading like a barbell because it's so intuitive. It's like, okay, I'm going to just add more weight and build up to my whatever weight's on the competition floor. But maybe with a rebounding box jump, it's like, oh, I'm going to warm up all these other movements, go over here, do a couple box jumps, good to go. It's like, take it a little more seriously, do a more thorough, progressive warm up for that movement in the same way you would with a heavy lift.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
On all this, the one whole area I didn't touch on at all, which comes to like trying to prevent these ruptures. And this probably has come out in the last few years. The metabolic aspect. And I know CrossFit people try to stay lean and healthy, but like if we're talking general population, you probably have people that are like obese and have diabetes and high cholesterol, high blood pressure. And a lot of those metabolic issues manifest in tendons. So they can manifest in the Achilles tendon, make it so it can make the tendon like more brittle, how like it's not going to be able to extend as far before getting some type of damage or some type of rupture. And it just influence tendon healing. So like people with all these metabolic issues, if they're going to start trying to do CrossFit, like you might adapt, your tendons might adapt in like a month and get much better. For them, they might adapt in 12 months. Because their metabolic health is so poor and their recovery is so poor. So I think paying attention to that if you have any metabolic issues, those you got to try to clear those up, or at least try to figure out what's going on there, because that there's an antibiotic called fluoroquinolones, and those are associated with Achilles tendon ruptures and any tendon ruptures, but past use of those, or at least in the immediate history, can really compromise tendons. So there are things in the bloodstream that can be going on that really compromise and a lot of them manifest in the Achilles tendon. It's the largest, strongest tendon, the most stressed tendon that you're always is experiencing stress. So yeah, metabolic issues are huge too. Probably not for like the top level CrossFitters who are like really healthy, quote unquote
Yeah.
healthy, but like the general pop people. If you're looking at adapting tendons, you got to look at, I wish there was a time frame, but muscles adapt really quick always. And tendons, I don't know how much they lag behind, but they're like maybe 3 times, 4 times, 5 times slower of an adaptation than a muscle. And I think because the blood flow is so much less. So yeah, if you're thinking of like, I want to be really good at rebound box jumps in a month, like from a muscle perspective, okay, maybe the muscle can be good in a month, but that tendon, that's going to take like 6 months to actually be safe and really good adapted for something like that. It just takes so much time to adapt tendons.
And I think it takes more time, the older you are with tendons relative to muscles too. Like I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I've read something about, or maybe watched a podcast about like, oh, when you're in your, your early 30s, like you can still get bigger biceps, but the adaptation of the tendon, if like you didn't grow up either with a lot of weight on you or doing like dynamic sports, like that tendon, not that you're a lost cause, but it's going
Yeah,
to be
no,
harder
it
to
is. It
catch
is.
up,
Yeah,
I think, right? Yeah.
it is exactly. And I think it's the same with bones. I think the
Right.
bones
But
kind
maybe
of,
that's what I was thinking about more, but yeah,
yeah, the
sorry.
bones kind of grow in that, like when you're getting when you're done skeletal maturity is like, you can still grow your bones, but like a lot of that bone development happened before that. And it's the same with the tendons. Whereas the muscles, it seems like you can grow muscles pretty much forever. Like muscles are always so sensitive to adaptation. But yeah, the tendons, those things really do slow down. So you have to think of, my friend Matt Watson, I brought him up already. He told me his high jump coach way back in the day was like, I think it was high jump. Yeah, he said, you'll be a good high jumper in a decade. And he was like, he couldn't appreciate this idea that like it's going to take a decade for like safely adapt all of these structures of the human body, the muscles, the tendons, ligaments, and then probably the neurological piece, maybe a little bit too. But yeah, it's like this long-term approach to tendons. You have to have a long-term approach of like consistently loading them, consistently being smart. And those are the people I think that stay healthy, stay away from tendon pains and tendon ruptures, is when you keep things consistent. I think, sorry to go on another tangent, but I think
No, it's fine.
for me, as I get older, I have so many periods of offloading and then really ramp ups of loading just because things get in the way or illness or whatever happens.
Yeah, same.
And I still have the outputs of like a 35, maybe like a 40-inch vertical or something like that. My nervous system stays tuned for that. It's probably going to stay tuned for that for the rest of my life. But if I just took 2 months off of loading, my structures, like my tendons they're not stiff anymore. So it's like I can still go and have the same output, but it's much more dangerous for my structures. So if I wanted to keep it safe for my structures, I would just keep dunking in every single week. I'd keep lifting in every single week. I'd stay consistent with my loading, but it's these peaks and valleys with loading, especially for someone who has high outputs. They're an explosive athlete. If you have peaks and valleys with your exercising, it's so dangerous for your tendons. That if you can keep things consistent, that's the best thing you can do so that you don't run into like significant tendon problems.
Yeah, that sounds like a warning shot at me. Wanting to play some recreational indoor and especially indoor. I was like playing some beach volleyball in the summer. You're in the sand, not nearly as much like impact, right, on your joints, your knees, and your Achilles. And then now it's like, oh, I'm gonna just go and play some indoor, and you're like, just I've never hit a 40-inch jump, but I think my max was whatever 35 or something, and I'm heavier too than I was when I played when I was younger, but still powerful. It's all that stuff. So it's like definitely a lot of warning signs. So although this podcast was for CrossFit athletes looking to compete, I've definitely taken some things away from myself for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The time frame, it's never the time frame you want. It's always much slower. And it often is like when you're younger, you always looked at things as like maximal effort is all the best. But as I get older, I'm just like, there's so much value with just going through the motions at a lower intensity, especially when it's like, I'm just trying to get this structure used to what I want it to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always value of just, quote unquote, rolling through the motions. Just to, continue that, keep that, a bit of that stress on the joints, tendons. Well, Jake, this has been great. I mean, for everyone that's been watching, I think they've learned a ton. Jake, if people I expect I'm going to be sending this to some coaches I know that coach some elite level athletes, and they'll be stoked with this. I wish we could have done it sooner, but hey, better late than never. Where's the best place to find you? Instagram, right?
Yeah, Instagram, Jake Tura. It's
Yep.
two U's, Tuura. And then, yeah, I mean, I do a lot of patellar tendon stuff because that's kind of my thing. But I'm doing, I got more podcasts coming up now, but I've done so many podcasts on Achilles. I've tried to get everyone on with, I've probably done 20, 30 podcasts with Achilles, Jacked Athlete podcast. Just
Yep.
contacting all the biggest experts in the world or people that work with athletes who deal with Achilles issues. And yeah, there's so much information out there that I have pretty much just through the podcast. Yeah, so that's the best
Great.
place.
Great. All right. Wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate. I know it's kind of been.
Where do we
It's like,
find you? Because this is also my show.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at Fikowski on Instagram is probably the main place. I sell some programs and stuff, but yeah, mostly, and then working on the Athlete Association, which is the main reason I was coming on here. Just strong voice, future of the career, all that with athletes in CrossFit, which is exciting. But yeah, people listen to this and said, "Oh, what's this guy all about?" I guess you can check me out there. But yeah,
Perfect.
find a CrossFit gym near you.
Yeah. All right, man. This
All
was
right.
fun.
This was great. Thanks so much, Jake.